After an application of Vallejo's Black Primer, I decided to use Liquitex Heavy Body Acrylics and Gouache in Golden Super Matte Medium along with water to thin the paints. I will give an estimation of the mixes, but be aware that these may not be exact. I'm getting away from exact mixes such as 1:1 or 3:1, instead have been focused on mixing gradients between two colors. If done correctly, you should get at least 5 visually distinctive colors from 2 paints, and the freedom to go back and forth between them quickly. This video will focus on the armor only. The color used for the flesh, bones of the helmet, the cloak, tabard, and the chainmail will be listed at the end of this video. The sword and shield will be done in its own video. For the armor, I wanted black plate since this was a Blackguard. Unfortunately, in the end, I didn't end up with an armor that looked black but rather blue instead. The plates of the armor was painted in 8 steps. Some of these steps were done 2 or 3 times, depending on how transparent the coats were. The Liquitex paint I'm using for most of these steps are from their Heavy Body Acrylics line, but do not let that title fool you. These paints are transparent, even the opaque ones. The way I painted this model was 3 to 4 different layers of Heavy Body Acrylics over the entire model, followed by 3 to 4 layers of gouache over these after. One thing to note with Heavy Body Acrylics are how easy it is to drown your brush in them. These paints are heavily pigmented, meaning that even when they're thinned down, they still stain nicely. It was about halfway through working on this blue armor that I found it was better for me to get very little paint on the brush and then fetch more paint from the palette more often than I was accustomed to. This approach of working with a minimally loaded brush allowed me to achieve much finer lines than ever before. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying that this is a feature of exclusively working with Liquitex paints, but rather making the jump to these new paints and then struggling to control them made me adapt how I was painting in general. It's entirely possible and probable even, if I followed the same approach with Army Painter paints, that I would find a similar improvement. My point in bringing this up is, if this does indeed improve my use of Army Painter paints, how much longer would it have taken me to figure this out if I didn't start using a completely different kind of paint? Or would I have ever figured this out? It's these forced breaks from complacency where I always feel I make the biggest gains of self-discovery in anything that I'm doing, be it in this hobby or in life in general. Fear of change is natural, but embracing it despite our hesitance is often rewarded with growth. One thing I wanted to point out is that how my highlight shapes change repeatedly throughout this video. Note the scratchy erratic lines on the chest. And now look at it. I use the same colors in the previous steps, but I decided the chest highlight should be more rounded. After all, it is one solid piece of metal and not composed of interlocking strips. After the first 4 layers of blues on the plate are completed, I begin building up the filigree on the other parts of the armor. I want these to be gold, so I follow a similar approach, building up from brown into oranges and yellows. A major struggle I found I'm having in this project is my placement of highlights. I was so hyper-focused on trying to keep my highlights and lines as thin as possible, I didn't really plan on any of the highlight placements, and they are truly all over the place and erratic. I continue building smaller and lesser highlights over everything again, but now with the Liquitex gouache instead of the Heavy Body Acrylics. I realized pretty quickly that I should have only used the heavy bodies for the horns, the cloak, and the shield. Everything else I should have used only the gouache for. Mainly because, and I should have put this together from all the Marco Frassoni videos I have seen, that the Heavy Body Acrylics are great for building up texture, which is what I want on the horns and cloak since it's coarse fabric. For the metals though, These I want textureless and smooth, which the gouache would have been better suited for. This is the end result, at least for now. For lessons learned, I desperately need to plan my highlights. The highlights on the armor are from overhead, a zenithal mostly from the right shoulder going down towards the left foot. But if you look at the handguard on the sword, the orientation of my admittedly poor reflections are nearly parallel with the ground. The highlights on the blue metal for the chest and right shoulder should be more rounded and less of a segmented look that they now have. The overlapping scale plates on the right arm just below the shoulder pauldron are highlighted in a manner that doesn't really make any sense. This is something I should have done some research on to have a better understanding of how the highlight should show on the points of these small diamond shapes. I also need to punch up the saturation on the gold embellishments on the armor, as well as increase the maximum brightness of the highlights. As it stands, it currently doesn't give the impression of being polished metal. I'll be finishing the shield and the blade soon, but I decided to put those off until a separate video as my intention is to put a lot of effort into the shield, making it the primary focal point of this model. And that's going to bring this video to its end. I hope you learned something or were inspired to start or expand your own collection. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below, and if you like the content of this video and would like to see more, please like, share, and subscribe. I'm Jim with Working with Miniatures. I'm truly grateful for your time, and I bid you a fond farewell. Until the next video.